Okay, everybody, so this is going to be a very fast 3-day crash course in graphics and how graphics work. Let's start with just a quick discussion about graphics, okay? 1 second. Guys! Thank you. I told them they were going to be on video, and they didn't listen. They just want to talk. They're guys, like me. They're loud. All right, so let's think about graphics for a second. Feel free to talk, guys. Just keep it down. At a giant level, graphics is specifically how we, the human beings, interact with the computer. Sometimes this is called a user interface. As a matter of fact, here in Manitoba, this is actually pretty well studied. At the University of Manitoba's Department of Computer Science, they actually have an entire lab dedicated to this called the Human Computer Interaction Lab, or HCI. It's actually pretty well known around the country as one of the leading sort of research fields in computer science on human and computer interaction. At a smaller level, this is about how users interact with computers through these user interfaces. Sometimes these are called graphical user interfaces, or GUIs. Okay? They started back when computers were very young with just simple text commands. Then they moved to graphical things like menus and pictures like over here you can see the first version of a button was just a rectangle on the screen. And then obviously with time and with what the users liked, this kept improving. On the screen right now, you'll notice the very first version of the Macintosh operating system. Underneath that, you see Windows version 1. Some of you have never maybe seen that before. But even in those early versions back in the 1980s, what I like to call the dinosaur times when I went to high school, you see some of the things you still see today. Like in the Mac environment, you see a trash can, right? Oh, I at least recognize that. You see a clock, and you see even a game in the early versions of Microsoft Windows. So you're starting to see even there, they were developing the kind of things that we have today. And what this is often based on is what's called the user's experience, which is often shortened down to UX. So a UI, a user interface, and a UX, the user's experience, started getting tied together. And graphics and the basics of how that worked became more and more important. So at its starting point, let's think of it conceptually as a container. The GUI, the user interface, is the container, and into that we put a bunch of controls. Okay? The user interface or the container could be thought of as a form or a frame or a window or an app or an application or the program. That's the container object. Controls could be also called components or tools or even Windows gadgets or widgets. These could be things like pictures or labels or buttons or menus, or again, depending on your experience level, text boxes, check boxes, list boxes, things like that. Okay? So if we look at it conceptually, we have this container object, and inside of that we could put some controls. For example, maybe a label and a picture and a button. So here you see the theory behind it, along with the actual implementation of it in both Windows and Mac environments. And actually there's one in between Windows and Mac that you may not notice there. It's actually called Linux or Unix, and how that would look inside of that environment. But even when we place a label inside of a form or a tool inside of a container, where you put it matters. So this is a matter of positioning. Where do I position that label? In addition to where I put it, how big I make it, or the shape of it, is also a matter. This is a mathematical thing. If you think about position, that's like an XY coordinate. If you think about shape, that's like a width-height coordinate. So if you think about it, a label, and let me just for a second here, just take my face off there. That label has a certain width and a certain height based on where we're positioning it. Okay. Now, this will obviously go further over the next 3 days. Like, okay, once I've built a design, how do I interact with it? Do I want it so that a button can be clicked on? Do I want it so that a mouse can drag a picture around the screen? Do I want it so that if the user moves a key, presses a key on their keyboard, it ends up making a picture move around? That's more the interactive side of things, or the sort of response to this user interface. That's going to be more later. Let's get started, okay? If you took the Computer Science 20th course, Visual Studio was all about this at the beginning. It was all about what's called a WYSIWYG editor. That's a big acronym. WYSIWYG means what you see is what you get. Believe it or not, this predates programs like Visual Studio. Microsoft Word is a WYSIWYG editor. When you work in Microsoft Word, it's supposed to look like the essay that will come out when you hit print. What you see on the screen in Word is what you're going to get when you hit print. Even PowerPoint is a WYSIWYG editor. What you do when you design a slide in PowerPoint is what's supposed to look like what's going to be done when you do your presentation. It's not exactly the same because we know there's going to be animations maybe or stuff like that, but it's pretty close. Photoshop is a WYSIWYG editor. So you're familiar with WYSIWYG editors, and Visual Studio was like that. What you saw when you designed something in Visual Studio is what you got when you ended up running the program. But what happens is it ends up writing all the code for you, which is great, saves you time. What I want to show you guys now is how you can do that using Java and specifically using NetBeans. That being the case, sometimes we like to write all the code ourselves. So I might also suggest later a hybrid approach where you write some of the code yourself and you use the editor a little bit. I'm going to try and show you lots of different options for ways you can create visuals and graphics, either entirely in code or using an editor or taking a mix approach or a hybrid approach. Okay. Now this will involve coding at some level. It will end up bringing in libraries of code, importing the libraries. You saw this back when you used JOptionPane the first time. It had to import code. For those of you who took the 20S Computer Science course, this actually happened at the top of your code in Visual Studio as well. It's just in C# it uses the word using, and in Java it uses the word import. But it's the same basic concept. Okay, so to use graphics, we will import graphics into our design. So let's start by doing that first. Let's set up first. This is the example we've been working on all year. It's an example for Computer Science 30S. Started with just this one Java file. And it originally started with just one method as well. Well, if we go down, the last method that we used was one called learn classes. Rather than make another method for learning classes, because we're done learning classes, so I'm going to comment that out. Instead, what I'm going to do is I want to learn graphics, but I don't want to make a method. Instead, we now know about classes like person and student. I'm going to make a class to demonstrate this. So I'm going to right-click and make a new Java class called Learn Graphics. So that's the name of my class called Learn Graphics. And in that class called Learn Graphics, I'm going to write a constructor method, which if you took the classes unit, you know what that is. And I'm going to do an output that I'm going to start learning graphics. And I'll intentionally misspell it, of course. And then I'm going to say that learning graphics is now complete. So when Learn Graphics is instantiated and it calls the constructor method, it will run those two outputs. Now I'm going to go back to my original Computer Science 30S file, and in the original public static void main, okay, I'm now going to say learn graphics equals new learn graphics. Very similar to random equals new random, which is a line of code in the 20S computer science course. You had no idea what that line does. Now you at least know, oh, well, this is the class. This is the object. This is the constructor method that instantiates this object. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you weren't paying attention during classes. That's okay. All right, so now it's going to go to this method and run those two outputs. Let's see if it works. Hit run. There's the two outputs, so I know it's at least working. And now I can leave this thing forever. I'm not going to come back here anymore. And now I'm going to focus on learning graphics. Okay. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a class to be part of my project again, but this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Instead of making a new Java class, I'm going to make a JFrame form. Now what this is it's a container object, what I was just talking about in theory. I'm going to call this JFrame form graphics1. So let's do this. Right click, new JFrame form, graphics1, implying I'm going to make a 2 and things like that. Now when I hit enter this time, now NetBeans transforms itself into a visual environment like Visual Studio. It allows me to use my container, my controls, and a properties window. And if you did Computer Science 20S, you know what all of those things are. Okay. Now, jumping back temporarily to the theory behind this, let me also explain that everything I'm showing you guys is also available in the content section of our class website. To use a GUI editor, which is what we're doing, an editor to graphically change the user interface, everything I just showed you about making a JFrame form and how NetBeans transforms is outlined in here. That you have these controls that in a minute I'll show you this as well. Actually, let me jump over to NetBeans. Up here at the top, you can switch between the source code and the design. This is a little different than Visual Studio, where it opens separate tabs, one for the code and one for the design. In NetBeans, it keeps one tab, and it just uses a button here to switch between design and source code. So I can go back to my design, or I can jump over to source code. Okay? So that's what it's showing right here. Okay? Now, it goes on further with that as well, but let's just start with this design thing. Okay? So I'm going to start by adding 4 things to my design. One will be a label. One will be a button. One will be a text field is what it's called here. It's not called a text box, it's called a text field. Be careful not to pick the one called text area. That's not the same. Text field. And then another label. So 2 labels, a text field, and a button. In Java, they're just going to put a J at the front, J for Java. So that's how I can add them. I can literally just drag them over from my controls over to my container. Okay? Once they're in the container, or you could use the word on the container, I can change things like size. I can start with the size of the container. Then I can also change position, like where this label is, where this text field is, where the button is, and what size and shape it is. So I could try to make it a perfect square. I could try to make it a rectangle. I can do all of those things. You'll notice in NetBeans, these weird little spring images appear. Looks like little springs. This is its attempt to help you to position things. Okay? It's not always helpful, but it does try. So if I resize this thing and then try to position my button, notice I can't have them overlapping. It won't let me because it's trying to help me. It's going, oh, don't do that. Don't overlap them. You've got a label there. Don't put the button over top of it. That doesn't make sense, even if that's what you wanted. And then maybe, whoa, that's not good. Let me try that again. Move this guy up here. Maybe make it longer. Maybe move this guy over here. Maybe make it wider. Okay? I end up positioning things and laying out a design like that. Okay? Haven't written a line of code. It's just using a visual drag and drop, using the mouse designer ability to do this. Okay? But now maybe I want to dig a little deeper. Maybe now what I want to do is change some of the properties of these things. Like I could take this label, and for example, there's a property called text, which says that's why the words JLabel1 are in there. So all I got to do is select that and change it to say something like hello world, which is good luck. And maybe this label here I could change the text, and maybe this button I'm going to change it so it says exit. Make it an exit button. Maybe this text field, I don't want it to have any text in it. So I'm going to remove the text completely, but at least the text field is still there. Now, there's a nice little feature in NetBeans right here, a little button with an eyeball on it that allows you to preview what it would look like if it was running right now. It's a little preview. Okay? Doesn't do anything, but it makes it look more like what it would look like if this thing was up and running right now. So this little eyeball here allows you to preview what your visual user interface might look like. Haven't written a line of code yet. Okay? All right. Time check. Okay. So the next thing I want to show you guys is something weird about NetBeans and how it does things and Java versus C# and Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, there was this beautiful thing called a picture box, which allowed pictures to be displayed. And one of the first things students will notice when they look at the controls in NetBeans, no picture box. How do I do pictures? My final project relies on me making a nice picture in here. Well, oddly enough, in Visual Studio, pardon me, I keep saying that, in NetBeans and in Java, it's the label that allows you to do both. Labels allow you to display text and display images. So I'm going to use this second label to display an image. So I'm going to get rid of the text. I'm going to take the text and get rid of it. So in order to display an image, I got to go find an image. Now I know people have been much nicer and quieter now, but actually now I want to hear from my students in the room. I want to look for an animated GIF. Animated GIF, but I want a topic for that. So I'm going to go to this website. I don't know, it's called Giphy. Why not? And can you guys give me a topic to search for? That would be a fun animated GIF. Okay, now you can speak. A fun topic for an animated GIF. Nothing? Nothing. One more time. A fun topic. Cat? I heard cat.
You can't go wrong with cat.
I'm going to add funny at least. I want something funny. That's weird.
Yeah.
Some of these, that's creepy.
No, it's all funny.
I know what I want. My cat tried this the other day. My cat tried to jump on my Roomba. Do you guys know what a Roomba is? Oh, there it is right there. Or maybe that one right there. I love that. Or the cat smacking the dog. There we go. That's the one I'm going to go with. Riding the Roomba and smacking a dog. That's the one I'm going to go with. I'm going to save this image as. I'm just going to stick it on my desktop for now. Giphy.gif. Sure. Good enough name. I know I've got an image saved on my desktop. Now, jumping back here. I need to obviously not change the text property. So here's where things get, you got to kind of look and get some experience. The one I'm going to be looking for is the one just called icon. Go to icon. You can see here it says none. But over along the far side here is a little button with 3 dots on it. The 3 dots is called an ellipse or an ellipses. I'm going to click on that ellipses. And now up comes, by the way, anytime you see ellipses in a computer program, it usually means you're going to be getting a dialog box to make another choice, which is what happened. So I don't have an image in my project, but I can import it into my project. So I'm going to click that, go to my desktop, select giphy.gif, click next. It's going to say, okay, well, where do you want to put it? For you 30th students, everything's always going in one package. For you 40th students, you know how to add packages. So you could actually add a package called images and put your images in there if you want to. But I'm just going to click finish. And now you'll notice giphy.gif is part of my project. I can click OK, and now it's part of this design. Now I made my label a little small, so let me make it a little bit bigger. That's not too bad. Okay, let me preview it now. Not bad, but why isn't it animated? Well, it's not animated because it's a preview at this point. It will be animated when I get the actual thing up and running, which is my next goal. Now I'm going to make one more change. I'm going to take the original label up here, and I'm going to make a couple just design changes. I'm going to change the font, and once again, I got an ellipses. I could pick a different font. Let's go with something pretty, I don't know. Bookman old style, bold, size 48. There we go. That's a little nicer. Let me also make one other change. I'm going to change a foreground color so the color of the text is a little nicer. And this time the dialog gives me a nice color chooser where I could pick like whatever color I want, or I could even do it different ways with sliders and all kinds of nice options for ways I can display the color. Okay, actually that's not that different than black. Okay, there we go. So I've done a visual design. What I hope you guys are going to see, because I'm about to end this video, is this is making your life a lot easier. More next time.